Hello and welcome to Stories of Hope. My name is Dan Solis. I've had the privilege over the past few weeks of talking with people about how God has spoken through their lives and taken care of them in tough situations. One of my guests in the past has been Bob Zabor, and Bob is back with us again to talk about how God has protected him in some very, very difficult situations. Now, I'm just going to review quickly for our viewers what we've talked about in the past.
All right.
You began moving here in the 60s to work at the Walla Walla General Hospital as a nurse. That was a more traditional situation.
Correct.
You've also worked at the Veterans Hospital in nursing. And then
Correct.
God opened up a new door of service, and you worked for 25 years at the Washington State Penitentiary as a nurse. We've talked about some of the situations in the past, one where you were attacked and knocked to the ground when you were distributing meds, another situation where you actually took an inmate home. Tell us about that program again just quickly.
All right, it was called Take a Lifer to Dinner Home program, and they allowed you to take a lifer to your home to have a meal.
Now, a lifer is a person that is in prison for the rest of his or her life, correct?
That's correct. And
these are the most dangerous people in our society, we think.
yes. And here I was exposing my wife and 2 children to this gentleman. Well, after we came from downtown to our home, here Baldy was playing horsey with my 2 children on our living room floor.
Now, Baldy is the nickname for the inmate that you
That's correct,
brought home.
Dan.
Right.
And they were either doing that or playing miniature golf out in their backyard. I had buried 5 coffee cans out there and used hockey sticks and tennis balls to play miniature golf. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, well, things are going all right so far. I said, do you have any plastic silverware for our meal, you know? And
rather than metal silverware.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. So we had our meal. It was good. And we had left. And on the way back, Baldy, the inmate, had asked me, he says, what would you have done if I tried to use one of your children as a hostage, or your wife, you know, or tried to escape? I said, I would have done everything in my power to stop you, including running you over with my car. And he said, that doesn't sound like a very Christian thing to me.
Nor was kidnapping your wife or your kids.
That's correct. Well, after we got back to the penitentiary, there were no more incidences. But Baldy, believe it or not, changed in a way that was quite dramatic. Now, he was a lifer, but his life changed so much, he actually got religion in the penitentiary, was baptized as Seventh-day Adventist, married a Seventh-day Adventist woman from the community, and got out on parole about 5 years later. And when he got out, they moved back to Seattle.
So sometimes when you minister grace, it awakens something in a person's heart.
That's correct.
Now, there were other people that you interacted with at the prison. The situation that you told us about before, where a person attacked you when you were delivering meds, was not the only time when your life was put on the line, was it?
No, it was not. We had been hearing rumors about the inmates starting some trouble and taking over the penitentiary. And lo and behold, one afternoon, on December 30th, 1974, still in the gray box, I was leaving a report, and to get off our floor, our hospital floor was on the 2nd floor. I got down to the first landing and looked, and there was an inmate with a great big set of keys trying to open the gate.
Now, are they supposed to have keys?
No.
Okay.
And that's what I said to myself. He's not supposed to have all those keys. So
Where did he get the keys?
he and a compatriot of his overpowered the guard on the first floor and stole his keys. They locked the officer up in a separate office room, and they were going to take over the hospital. Well, I ran back up, told the nurses what had happened, and I says, I'm going back out, and I'm going to jam the lock with some ball pens I have in my pocket. And I put them in the keyhole, and they had big keyholes. It took about 4 or 5 pens to fill it up. And I was just ready to jam it when I heard the inmate downstairs yell up through the stairwell, pour more alcohol over here and let's start this hospital on fire. And
Do you know why the hospital? It seems like of any place in the penitentiary that you wouldn't want to destroy, it would be the hospital.
Believe it or not, Dan, the hospital was looked upon by the inmates as a place to go to die. They had inmate nurses before I came there and before ex-corpsmen from the service, Army and Navy, came to the penitentiary to work. And they took care of each other. And they charged the patients a certain fund of drugs, money, or immoral things. And so the hospital did not have a good reputation.
Okay. Go ahead with the story.
Okay, so then...
You've got the pens jammed into the thing. And
yeah, but I didn't jam it. I took all the pens back out, told the nurses what happened, and lo and behold, the inmate had opened the door downstairs, came up with 6 or 8 other female hostages, the x-ray technician, a dental assistant, and so forth, from the first floor. So here were a group of us that were being held hostage inside the nursing station in a hospital. And they took every medication we had, every needle and syringe, every IV bottle, and put it in pillowcases that they got from the laundry room on the floor, threw it out the windows to fellow inmates who were down there waiting for all these supplies to sell to other inmates in population. It was a going business. I thought I might have a short nursing career. They put me in a chair similar to what we're sitting on now, only they made me sit in it backwards with a back between my legs. Because at the time I was there, I was kind of the assistant to the man who taught the SWAT team that they had at the penitentiary hand-to-hand combat. And the one inmate says, we know your reputation, so you just stay seated in there and don't move. And he walked around with a female hostage and a big homemade dagger to the female's throat. And at the same time, he was molested.
You said some of these daggers were actually made out of the food that was served.
That's
Is that correct?
At one time, we were having T-bone steaks, but they had to quit it because the inmates were taking the bones, drying them out in the sun or under a heat lamp, a light bulb, and then sharpening it up. And the T-bone made a very nice weapon with they put the T in your hand and you had the big bone sticking out between your fingers.
So they have these homemade weapons or cell-made weapons, and they're using them to hold your staff hostage.
That's correct. Now, after 2.5 hours, the SWAT team did arrive. Now, some of the inmate patients had been relaying messages to the inmates that were holding us hostage and said, the riot squad is coming, stab the victims. And they had all the female nurses inside the inner part of the nursing station on the floor. And so when I saw the knife raised, I ran to the double Dutch door that we had to get into the inside of the inside nursing station. The inmate turned around and says, get back in your chair or I will stab this nurse. So I went back to my chair. I wasn't going to play a hero and have another person's life in danger for me acting like some big gung-ho inmate stopper, you know. So I got back in there, and the riot squad came on, broke all the glass in the nursing station. I had to help one officer because he got broken glass in his eyes. And finally, they couldn't get inside where the inmate was holding all the female hostages, so I picked one inmate up, or not an inmate, but the officer, by his belt line and pant leg, threw him over the door so he could corral the inmate in there. And sure enough, they did apprehend him. And within about 10 minutes, everything was settled and back to normal.
Now, when we were talking before, you said that there was a situation where you intervened when some of the corrections officers were beating a defenseless inmate, and your reputation was not all bad among the inmates, correct?
That's correct.
So some of them looked up to you as someone who was fair-minded. Do you think that that might have played a part in the fact that they didn't kill you when they had that opportunity?
It may have, Dan. I can't emphasize the fact that I prayed an awfully lot. My wife and I have made 2 rules very subject in our life, and that was always put God first in everything that you do. I don't care what it is, your business, your marriage, always God first. And the second was trust and obey God's promises and obey His word. And that's what we did, and it certainly helped.
Now, when you were praying in this situation, this wasn't a foxhole prayer. This is not something that you just did when you were being attacked, right?
No. No, I prayed constantly throughout the day. For 25 years, I could have been Martin Luther and been a monk. I prayed so often and so much. But the Lord did bless, and I can't emphasize the fact that I can't thank Him enough, not only for the salvation that He provides us, but for the protection that He gave my wife and I when I took the inmate home, and all the different circumstances that happened through the past 25 years while I worked at the penitentiary.
When you retired, did you feel a sense of relief?
Very much so. There's 3 dates that I remember very vividly, and that's the day I was hired was November 16th, 1970. I was 39 years old, and the next day I was turning 40. The next day date I remember is December 30th, 1974, when we were taken hostage. The third date was my retirement date of December 30th, 1995, when I retired. I went through the service of 9 different superintendents in my 25 years there, but I even wrote a 113-page book about my experiences at the penitentiary, those that I could remember. And believe it or not, I did submit it for publication. And Liz Scott, Wiley, and Bliss wanted to publish it, but they wanted me to pay them $2,000 to have it rewritten and re-edited and then submit it, you know, and have it printed up as a book. And I said, well, if I have to pay them $2,000, it can't be too good a book. So I never did pursue anything.
But what is clear is that through it all, God has been very close to you, and
Amen.
God has taken care of you.
Amen.
And friends, I want you to know that God will take care of you as well. You may not be held hostage in the Washington State Penitentiary, but you may feel like you're a hostage under lockdown right now. You may feel like nobody cares, that you're all alone. But God is with you no matter what you go through.
Amen.
Prayer, connecting with God on a personal one-to-one basis, can bring relief to your anxieties, your worries, and your fears. talking with God as to a friend
Amen.
can be your story of hope. Again, if you have a story of hope that you would like to consider sharing on this program, please contact me, Dan Solis, DANSOLIS TV @gmail.com. Thank you for joining us for this story of hope.